Good evening, everyone. How's everyone today with this rain? We had some choices, right? To be here or not to be here. And then when I saw on the news it was going to rain, I said, what are the choices going to be today? To stay home or to go? And it's very nice to see faces that have challenged all the rain and all the things that we could have given ourselves excuses not to be here, but we're here. So that tells me that we're on the right path of choosing what's best really for our spirit, not just for the flesh. So today's lecture is going to be about spiritual choices, but the main center of what we're going to talk is about goodness and also evil. Is there such thing as evil? Is there such thing as love and then the complete opposite? And do we choose to be good or do we choose to be evil people? Do you believe there are evil people? So these are all things we're going to discuss as we go through the different cards. And of course, everything we will back it up with what we need to back it up with, card deck. So all of the questions, let's go back and say what Spiritism, what the 5 books, the basic, the solid foundation of our faith really has to say about it. So there is no such thing as I think. Let's really go to the source and say, what does card deck say about it? So we'll begin with a question. Do we have free will? And you guys can say it loud or you can think in your mind. Do we all have free will? We do. So do we have free will to choose good and bad? We do. So when we look at this, what do you see? Now, some people will see the angels, some people will see the little bats or the devils, whatever you want to call it. And it's interesting because about now you look at each other and say, I saw angels. And the other ones will say, oh, I better not say what I saw. And the truth is, there's a duality inside of all of us. We all have pieces of us that will really bring out what's in us depending on how we see things. If you concentrate so much on, let's put quote unquote, on evil, this will come out of you, that evil part that is really not evil, but we'll even go in psychology and say this what we call shadow, or what Jung would call shadow. These things that have been inside, these things that we kind of want to deny ourselves that they exist inside of us. But in reality, everything, we do live in this dualism. We're not entirely angels, but we're not even close to being entirely, again, quote unquote, evil. We're spirits that are progressing. We are, and the beautiful thing is that we know the progression leads to complete goodness. And that is all we have to worry about. We don't have to wonder, am I going to always be falling? Am I always going to be making mistakes? We're on the path to progress. So we all have this. And again, it's really what you choose to look at. We can look at a person and know nothing about it. But the more we know about this person, we can start seeing the bats in them, or the evil in them, or the goodness in them. And it is a choice. It's a conscious choice. When Jesus said, your eyes are the reflection. When your eyes are good, your entire body will be light. What he says is when you choose to see the good in people, you will find the good in people. Your entire body will reflect this light. So then Jung would come and say, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by molding the darkness, by making the darkness conscious. That means it's not about being this perfect person, this enlightened person, but we have to be aware of what inside of us still need work. If we keep denying all the things that we need to work, we'll never get there. So Jung says, again, look at the light, but be aware of the things that you have to work on. As we go on, the question about good and evil, does it exist? And I love this video because it brings a point.
Nun werde ich euch beweisen, dass Gott, wenn es ihn gibt, böse ist. Hat Gott alles, was existiert, erschaffen? Wenn Gott alles erschaffen hat, dann hat er auch das Böse geschaffen. Das bedeutet, Gott ist böse.
Herr Professor, existiert Kälte?
Was für eine Frage soll das sein? Natürlich existiert die Kälte. War euch noch nie kalt?
Nein, in der Tat, Herr Professor, die Kälte existiert nicht. Nach den Gesetzen der Physik ist das, was wir als kalt empfinden, nur das Fehlen von Wärme. Und existiert Dunkelheit, Herr Professor?
Selbstverständlich existiert sie.
Nein, sie ist nur das Fehlen von Licht. Wir können das Licht messen, aber die Dunkelheit nicht. Das Böse existiert nicht, genau wie die Kälte und die Dunkelheit. Gott hat das Böse nicht geschaffen. Es ist das Ergebnis dessen, was Gottes Hand noch nicht berührt hat.
So in a very quick clip, I think it brings us the whole message about is God an evil God? Is there such thing as evil? When the student says, does God exist? And the professor says, no. And when the student says, does cold exist? And the teacher says, cold exists. Not really. Cold doesn't exist. There is no fountain of cold. There is not a lamp of darkness either. There is no source of cold, and there is no source of darkness, and there is no source of evil. Thus, evil does not exist. It is only the absence of love. So if we look at that, then we understand immediately. But some people might say, well, in here, obviously it's cold, so there is a source of cold. No, the air conditioning does not provide cold. It takes the heat out. Very different. So again, love will infiltrate and replace any kind of darkness. So there is no fountain of evilness. There is no such thing. It's just the absence of goodness. So I think we're good with that. And again, it's attributed to Albert Einstein. We never know exactly if it was him who said it, but regardless if it was or not, then we can get the point. We're going to continue on. And the last video is going to be at the very end, so we'll continue on. So again, what is evil? On the Spirit's book, actually on Genesis chapter 3, Kardec asks, what is evil? And the Spirits will say, one can say that evil is the absence of good, as cold is the absence of heat. So again, very easily explained. So we cannot get lost on what is evil. There is no such thing. Before Einstein. So let's think about it. It's been there. So on Genesis, chapter 3, item 8. And there are many references through the whole codification about this subject. Then we go and we say, well, did God create evil? Which shouldn't even be a question, but Kardec he liked to really touch, not to leave any doubts. He liked to ask, and sometimes the Spirit, you can see that their answer is a little, Kardec, you already said that. They almost get bothered by it. But I love how he insists, so there's no shadow of any doubt. And then, God did not create the evil. He established the laws which are always good, because he is good. The spirits would have been completely happy had they faithfully observed the law since the beginning. But being free to make choices, the spirit have not properly obeyed them. So that evil come as a consequence of this unwillingness. One can say that good corresponds to everything which is in accordance with God's law, while evil is everything which opposes it. Now this is in What is Spiritism? Very thin, small book that I think everybody should, it's a must. Chapter 3, item 129. Then we go on, and we're going to ask some questions now. What are the causes and origins of evil? Sometimes we say, well, what are the causes of it? Where did it come from? Again, in the book of What is Spiritism, the imperfection of the spirits that here incarnate is the origin of all evil on earth. There is nobody that's here, that lives here on planet Earth, that is here as a primitive spirit. Because the planet is not a primitive planet. So everyone who lives here have passed through primitive, even if Earth was at one point a home to primitive spirits, it isn't now. We know that. So now we can't really blame our ignorance that much. See, the more knowledge we have, the less excuses we have to do anything against God's law. But how is it that in this world, and when there is a number, it's a question on the Spirit's book. In this world, the wicked so often have power over good. And we ask this all the time. People that are not Spiritists, and they come to the doctrine, that's one of the first questions they make. Why is there so much evil? How does your doctrine explains this? You know, why is that? Why do we see, we turn on the news, 80% or more, it's not good news. Why is that? Well, that is a consequence of the weakness of the good. The wicked are intriguing and audacious. The good are often timid. When the latter shall be determined to have the upper hand, they will have it. Now, we always say that I'd rather not do anything. I don't want to get involved. We might see kids being bullied. We might see political discussions getting heated up. And the easy way out is to do nothing. But that isn't the easy way out. Because that is why our world continues to be much more stagnant than it should be. Because we could be much further if a few good stand up and say it. So when we say nothing, we are choosing to remain in the status quo. It's very important for us to know that. Because people who come up here, people who, like Livia, I'm sure there's a lot of stones thrown at her without them seeing what happens behind closed doors, what it takes to make things happen. So when you expose yourself to criticism, when you expose yourself to the world, you will get criticism, but you will be doing something. I know I'm going to be giving a lecture on Paul and how, you know, he was a tough cookie back then, before his conversion. But you know, I trust those people better because once they get it, they will also be the most amazing workers because they won't really care what comes at them because they know they're doing the right thing. So again, when we stand up and start really talking to people about Spiritism, about, I don't care, you come at me, come with questions. I may not have the answers, but I know a few books that will. Has man of himself the means of distinguishing what is good from what is evil? What do you think? Can we really tell what's good and bad? What do you guys think? You think? But do we sometimes not know? Or we pretty much know? We pretty much know, right? So what would Kardec say about? Well, yes, when he believes in God and desires to do what is right. Now, I color desire in red because a lot of the faults that we carry has to do with our unwillingness. Remember the question before? We know what's good and bad, but it's too much work to do the right thing. I don't really desire that much. And that's usually what ends up being. It's our lack of desire. Once we really get down and dirty and we say, I want to know what's good. I want to know the right path. Then we wonder, well, what if I know what is right and wrong, yet I choose a path that is contrary to goodness? Are all evil and good absolute for all men? And again, evil we're using in a sense of the absence of goodness. But that's Kardec asking on question 636 on the Spirit's book. What do you think? Are good and evil absolute for everybody? No. Good? Good is always good, and evil is always evil. Whatever a man's position may be, the difference is in the degree of responsibility. So I love it because the spirits are not excusing and saying, oh, well, there's a little scale on good or evil. No, they're very forward on this. Good is good. There's no around it. And evil is evil. You can color and paint it whatever color you want, but it's always going to be evil. So you can try to use fancy words, and we see this. We see this all over the place. People might look a certain way, but if it's evil, it's evil. If it quacks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. But the degree of responsibility will depend on what? On your level of ignorance on the subject. If a little child walks in here and kicks me on the leg and walks away, is she an evil child? No, if an adult comes here and kicks me on the leg, has more responsibility, right? Because the child doesn't know, really. Now, the kick still hurts. You see, that's the whole point about it. And then on 632, Kardec goes to ask, a man is subject to error. May he not be mistaken in his appreciation of good and evil and believe himself to be doing right when in reality he's doing wrong? Did you ever wonder when you're doing something right, you think you're doing the right thing and then you're really not? You end up being, doing the wrong thing. So since we're subject to error, Kardec wants to know, well, can we make a mistake and think that we're doing the right thing when we're really not? Jesus said, whatsoever you would that man should let's go back to do unto others as you wish to have done to you. So that is really the whole moral law. Make it your rule of action and you will never go wrong. Now, how beautiful is that? Because then Kardec makes the reference to the golden rule. If there is any doubt as what should I do, I like our friends, the evangelical Christians, when they have the T-shirt and all of that, what would Jesus do? Did you ever see that? And basically, that's what I usually do when I have a path or when I have to make a choice or answer someone. I kind of stop, and I would never understand what would Jesus do because I'm not at his level, but I try. And then when I think and I say, what would I like to hear now? And then it's always the right thing to do. So go back to that golden rule. In 640, Kardec continues and he says, is he who profits by another's wrongdoing, even though he took no part in its commission, as guilty as though he had taken part in it? What do you think? If something bad happens and you just kind of, just take a little piece of the pie, are you as guilty as what happened? Or a little less guilty because you weren't the main person? What do you think?
If you know what's wrong, he was guilty.
Okay, so let's see. The spirits will say yes. It's equivalent to doing it. Now, he doesn't even say, yes, you have some part in it. So if I am with a movement that is doing something wrong, but then I'll use the excuse of, well, I'm not them. I'm just kind of following them, but I'm not. Well, might as well just say you're doing it too. So we start taking a different perspective in life. What do I want to be part of? What do I want to sign my name into? Because you will be as responsible as the movement itself. Now, let's suppose, I hope I didn't take the wrong thing. Okay. Let's suppose that your daughter or whoever you loved works at a supermarket and the boss cheats her out of her paycheck. And then you get a chance to go to that supermarket, and when you go to pay, the person gives you a lot more money than you thought. You don't notice, you go to the car, everything works out. Then you realize, oh no, they gave me a lot more than I, on change. What do? But he cheated your daughter out of. So we go back to that question then. So taking some kind of advantage over anybody else's fault will make you as guilty. So what it means is there's no way to justify our actions. correct? Now, this truck had fallen, and this was a real case with a lot of meats, a lot of food. You can imagine whatever it was. Say you're driving to your Sunday barbecue and you see a truck in the heat of Florida, because I came from Jersey, so this would have lasted more. And you see a truck with all this merchandise going. Do you stop and take a piece of the pie?
It's going to go bad. Huh?
Ah, that's one of the questions. I always have someone that says that. So it's going to go bad. Goes back to Kardec's original question. Does it justify? Would taking someone else's property be okay at any point? So Kardec is very, right? But the meat will go bad. Doesn't matter. But what if you know someone who's hungry? Doesn't matter. So it's still a bad action, taking advantage of somebody else's misfortune. Now, it's funny because one person told me, she said, well, what if everybody got together, asked the man where the meat was to be delivered, and everybody kind of got together in their cars and helped to have it delivered? Isn't that beautiful? When we start opening our minds to different possibilities, to different actions, you see how love can really be such a movement if we don't look at just our pride, as our Spiritism teachings always tell us. And the evil of our world is really pride and selfishness. So once I look at the driver and I say, oh my goodness, is he going to be out of money because of this? And I say, listen, my car fits this much. I can drive it to wherever you're going. See, when we start this unification for the better of all, what do you think would happen? Your chances of getting to the destination and say, you can keep one of those, right? 642, Kardec makes a point here. It is necessary, the spirits do actually, it is necessary for each to have done good also, to the utmost limit of his ability. For each of you will have to answer not only for all evil he has done, but also for all the good which he had failed to do. Now this one hurts, right? This is like in Brazilian, we would call it a chinelada. It's like a little slap with the flip-flop, you know? So if I see someone with whatever difficulty they might have, and you just look and you keep going, and out of that chance that you had to help that person, you do nothing, and then that person, something even more horrible happens. Are you responsible?
Yes.
That's a clear indication here. So if I fail to do whatever goodness I could have done in that situation, and something bad comes out of it, I'm just as guilty. So it's a choice, again, spiritual choices. What choice do I have? And I think we're at a position that we can't really claim that we didn't have any choices. We have choice. Not choosing is a choice. When we silence, it's a choice. It's a very conscious and most of the time comfortable choice. Why do we do? Why don't we do more good? What do you think? Why don't we do? There's so much. And again, Kardec is saying that we could be doing so much stuff. And why are we not? Now, I'm going to bring some psychological aspects of why people do what they do most of the time, why we choose to maybe take the wrong path instead of the easy path. Now, some of the factors of even good people, let's put it, committing evil actions: anonymity, obedience, dehumanization, tediousness, indifference. Now, those 5 things, and I love to study those things. I love to study human behavior. And we'll see how we really justify so many of our actions, so many of our choices, by really picking one of those things, by really kind of wearing that shield so we're not going to take the right action. First, we can see when you're an anonymous person, when nobody can see you, when nobody can really know it was you, do you think you're more prone to do the right thing or the wrong thing? You see, that's why Kardec asks, like, a 909 question, and he says, what can I do or to get better, to really get out of this person, this old man? And they say, know thyself. know yourself. Why? Because we can see at war, we can see a lot of, even Indian tribes, when they color, when they wear different uniforms, when they wear different personas, people are a lot more prone to do things that they would not do have they had their visibility. You see, it's very easy to have a comment box here at the center. Throw your anonymous comment. And most of those comments will not be good things because you don't have to sign your name. But when you have a meeting and you say, what is the problem? Let's really put our things. Not many people will voice. And even less will offer to help. You see, it's very easy for us to shield ourselves of who we really are in order to pick the thing that is the contrary of God's law. So on question 456 on the Spirit's book, the Spirit, Kardec asks, do spirits see everything that we do? Yes. And for the most part, yes. So can we really be anonymous? We really can. Who are we fooling? So when we start thinking, my choices are open. My choices, whatever I choose to do, I can't hide behind any costume, any fatigue, because you can be a soldier and fight honorably. Or you can use that uniform to cause atrocities, hiding behind that uniform, right? My son's going to be soon in a Navy. He's any moment now. So I tell him, I say, listen to your conscience, whatever the consequences. And listen to your mom, too, I tell him. Well, he won't be able to tell me he's going to a program. I won't be able to know where he is. So I tell him, I said, listen, one thing I gave you are roots. Now you have wings. So the roots I gave you to the best I could. But one thing I'll tell you, listen to your conscience. Really do the right thing. Don't worry so much about the consequences. I never do. If I know I'm aligned with him, then do I have faith or do I not have faith? And what is faith? I think the most beautiful definition of faith is really trust and surrender. It's a perfect combination of knowing, of trusting, and yet you surrender to God's will. Isn't that beautiful to know that? And when I know that he's got my back, then I'm not worried about consequences. Second, obedience. Who here has heard of this Stanley Milgram study? Right? And we very briefly here, Stanley Milgram in 1963, if I remember, he conducts this study in a university and he recruits people, men, normal men, just like us. And he wanted to know, really, the Holocaust is over. Do you think real people would do the things that took place? And of course, we'd like to say, no, nobody would ever force anybody to do such thing. So what he did was he set up this experiment. And Milgram, let's say Milgram is that E, okay? And he was the one conducting the study. So he pretended that he was wearing a white lab and he was going to study people's memories. So he recruited people that knew nothing about it. The real purpose of the subject, the experiment. And he asked the students, he said this, the S is a student. So he said, listen, I'm doing a test of memory. And what happens is you're going to be managing this machine, which is an electrical shock machine. It goes from 15 volts to up to 450 volts, okay? Think about it. 300 volts is a very dangerous level. Anybody here that knows a little electric? 300 volts? It hurts. It's pretty bad. 450 volts will kill. It's a fatal shock. So what he did was he asked the student, every time that the subject, this number A here, there was a glass, so he couldn't really see him, but he could hear. Every time that he doesn't get the word right, I want you to, to turn the machine so he gets a little shock, a little zap. And as he makes mistakes, I want you to keep going a little more so he gets more of a shock. So, what would we do? Now you have a man here with a lab coat asking you to keep shocking. And now as the person made mistakes, and of course, by the way, this person there was not a real person getting shocked, but you could hear the scream, so you believe that someone is getting shocked. And people would keep going. Every time that the person made mistakes, they kept raising the voltage of the machine. And the person getting shocked would yell, sometimes even say, listen, I have a heart problem, stop, please. And the students would turn to him and say, well, I don't know if I feel comfortable going on. And all he would say is, the experiment, you must continue. This is part of the experiment. This is part of what you signed up for. Now, he had said that you would get paid no matter what. Anytime you could stop. How many people stopped? It's a very, today it'll be completely unethical. It was unethical then, but, So, what do you think? 20 people, and this has been reproduced down the road afterwards. How many of those you think would even reach 300 volts, which is a dangerous level? Would you guys ever go, and you don't have to answer, think of your conscience. Would you go up to 300 volts where someone is yelling and saying, well, guess how many of them did? 12 out of 20? All of them.
No way.
All of them did. So let's think about it. These are normal people. There's actually, they made a movie, into a movie as well. Now, all people shocked someone that was clearly in pain only because somebody with a lab coat that they actually didn't even know if it was a doctor or whatever, a professor, they did. And how many actually do you believe would go to 450 volts? Not all, thank God, but about 65%. 65%. Now, these are not people that didn't know what it meant. They all knew. This is a fatal shot. And this is in 63. And this experiment was done again with kind of better, but still. Now, we like to know that we're so safe and secure of what we do. But again, Kardec comes and tells us, know thyself. You still have a choice. Did the students have a choice?
Yes.
To stop?
Right.
They all had a choice to stop. So why didn't they? Obedience. Now, do we obey people blindly without questioning? It's amazing. It's amazing how influential we are. We watch the news for 15 minutes. Instagram, 15 minutes will cause some depression at a person who's just browsing through. It's amazing. And then we're talking about choices. Again, we all have choices. Stanford prison experiment, I won't go because we got about 10 minutes. I want to get through a few things. But again, look it up. Stanford, just very quickly, Zimbardo was an amazing psychiatrist, and he wanted to know if you were in a position of a guard or a prisoner, would you act that to the extreme? So he set up these mock prisons. I'm going into it. So he set up these mock prisons down in Stanford University basement, and half of the students, and again, I'm summarizing these, okay? So look up the details. But half of the people, he kind of just chose some students to play prisoners, some to play guards. And he figured 2 weeks, let me see how this turns out. Well, 3 days, the first person had their first mental breakdown. A prisoner, a fellow student. Because those who were given uniform and told that they were guards were acting with cruelty. Now think about it. These were university students, fellow students that saw each other. And those who were given the uniform of a prisoner, they actually started going into depressed states. 3 days, this had to shut down. And Zimbardo himself, who was and is an amazing psychiatrist, you could see his body language. He would walk with his hands like this, with this position of authority. It was his girlfriend who said, have you looked at yourself on the tape? How you, all of a sudden, became the warden of this experiment? Dehumanization. We see this with the Tutsi and Hutus in Africa. We saw these two tribes, people of the same country. The Tutsis were tall and thin. The Hutus were more of the short, more, this experiment. And not an experiment. This is what was a major civil war, really, people against people. And all the government had to do is to say that the hoodoos were cockroaches. He started saying, these are not people, these are insects, they're cockroaches. And the people started to believe that they were less human. In a period of 100 days, there was 800,000 deaths. Now think about it, 800,000 deaths in a period of 100 days. Because they took the humanity out of that person. Again, what are the choices that we're making? That was in Rwanda. We see the Holocaust, all because once you denominate someone less as your own, as your brother, as a sister, when you call them, this is a rat, this is an animal, then you begin to see others differently. And we have to pay very close attention because we are doing this much more than we like to admit. When we say, this is not a spiritist, this person is not, sometimes if we're not careful, we'll start to take even the human part out of some people. Where I have the center, there's a lot of even homeless people. And I like to talk to them, and a lot of them tell me, and they say, you know what the toughest part is? It's not money. It's not this. It's just being visible. It's not having one person to look in your eyes that day. I go to New York, and I'm always late every time I lecture in New York because then I always find someone. And then the one center that I go to, I always say, listen, I might be 55 minutes late, and they know me. And then you find me sitting there with them, and I'm not saying this to, please, not to brag. It's just that if you can take 3 minutes and just sit down, and I'll sit down, I don't care. And I'll sit down and say, yo, what's going on? What's happening today? And they say, you know, this is the best that I had today. I had a 3-minute conversation today. So again, once we bring humanity into people, you'll find amazing stories. You will have so many choices in your life when you really open your eyes and you see humans are basically good. They're just absent of a lot of love. And that's what brings them to do evil acts. Tediousness, we see this in Abu Ghraib. This is a few of the guards that they committed atrocities with these prisoners. And again, all because they were bored. Now, Emmanuel will say that most people who really go into this sense of life doesn't really have that much meaning, life is kind of nothing. It's a perfect storm when you have idleness, when you have lack of faith, and when you have satiety. I did one of my master's thesis on this, and it's great because I brought spiritism into the psych and all that, and it was great. I forced them to read my paper. But it was really because if you're bored, and that's why Emmanuel tells us work. That's what Paul says, work. Abigail inspired Paul, the apostle, to say work. When you everything, you have it all. You have no wants, no longing for anything else. And when you have no faith, there's a problem. Because then there's really no reason. There's nothing beyond that. Indifference. We see indifference with animals. We see indifference with this native Indian in Brazil. Just because he was an Indian, it was nothing. Someone set fire to him. And I'm sorry that I'm bringing some things, but this will make us see the important choices that we must make. We see with the homeless, we see with the elderly. When we believe some people don't make a difference, it's a very hard pill to swallow for you to bring them and for you to say, I need to do something about it. I have a choice about this.
Stop. Pay attention.
We have a video that's 3 minutes.
Take a look at this crowded waiting room. These people may appear to be waiting for the eye doctor, but they're actually waiting for the first test subject in our hidden camera experiment. And here she is, right on time for her 12 o'clock appointment.
Hi, how are you doing?
This woman thinks she's here for a free eye exam.
Have you been here before? No, it's my first time.
What she doesn't know is that everyone else in this room is working for us.
They'll be with you in just a couple minutes.
Today we're running an experiment on social conformity, and the test starts now. Did you hear that? These people sure did. It doesn't take long for our test subject to notice a pattern. Beep means stand up. But why? And if you were in her shoes, what would you do the next time the tone sounds? While you might think you make your decisions all on your own, when it comes to peer pressure, all too often, your brain is just following the crowd. It's all around you, every day, an invisible force you're probably not even aware of. It affects what you do, how you think, and who you are. It's called social conformity, or peer pressure. And while it might not sound like a good thing, it's actually not so bad. The truth is, your brain craves synchronicity and takes comfort in the ease and efficiency of just going with the flow. And whether it's simply knowing what to wear in the morning, supporting your team at the big game, or even marching off to war, we're all programmed to be part of the group. And that's because your brain knows that there's power in numbers. We set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes.
Great,
thanks so much.
Why are you staying?
Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room.
So we like to admit that we wouldn't do that we really would not conform so quickly. And there are many and many of those experiments. I've done one without people knowing at my own center, and it's as fast as that for people to conform. So why are we choosing to do the things that we do? And I want to, just about finalizing with this one question, one of the questions on the Spirits book. Are we really, all our vices, Kardec asks, is it sometimes the case that the situation, remember this video, which a man finds himself placed has a good deal to do with leading him into vice and crime? Is it the situation? They answer this, yes, but the situation is itself a part of the trial which he has chosen, which was chosen by the Spirit in his state of freedom. He has elected to expose himself to its temptations in order to acquire the merit of resistance. Now, on the next question, Kardec will say, when a man is plunged, so to say, in an atmosphere of vice, even there, think of the atmosphere the girl was in, does not the impulsion to evil or to conform become for him almost irresistible? And there's the answer. The impulsion is strong, but not irresistible. So the impulsion is strong for us to conform, for us to do as others do, but it's not irresistible. And we have to be aware of this. And that perhaps is the most important question that you guys got to remember today, 645 of the Spirit's book. We can all be kind of pushed to do things, but it's not irresistible. We still have choices. We still can choose to not stand up because we didn't question. We didn't act with reason. That's what happens there. And then we went with the flow. But we got to remember that just as evil, there is so many goodness in the world. Who remembers hurricanes here in Florida? People, it gets the worst and it gets the best out of people. Here is Hurricane Sandy in New York, when people had some power and they put their power outside. And people chose to do this, while others took 2 generators where they didn't need 2 generators. But there were some people that chose to do this. We see this man on the New York subway choosing to take his own shoes to give to this homeless man. We see this man in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, who saw this homeless girl and chose to take his own flip-flops and give it to her. We see children doing the right thing, people choosing to do the right thing. We see soldiers bringing love to these children that have only seen war and the worst in people. Would a man's own efforts always suffice to enable him to vanquish his evil tendencies? Kardec asks. Yes, very slight ones are often all that is needed. It is the will that is wanting. How few of you make serious efforts to vanquish those tendencies? And so I finish, my friends, really with this slide and really thinking, if we want to change, to make better choices, to make really choices that are aligned with what Jesus has taught us and what Kardec has brought to us as this consoler, let's really think it only takes slight changes in our behaviors, slight changes of choices we make. Let's really think about it. Let's make the choices that are aligned with the law of justice, with the law of love. And you can guarantee you will not be alone. You will not be without a backup. Thank you for your patience. I hope to see you guys soon.